Hello, my name is Steve Waller. Back in June of last year, I bought a 2022 Tesla Model Y, and I've been driving it for the last 8 months and have put about 16,000 miles on this car, including about 10 trips over 1,000 miles each. I've driven this in the summer and through the Upper Peninsula winter. As a driver of an electric car, I've had all kinds of comments, myths, rumors, concerns. So I thought I'd put a package together here trying to explain what I've learned and the realities of driving an electric car. These are the three barriers to getting an electric vehicle to people who don't yet have one and maybe would get one if they had answers to these questions, such as charging logistics, like how do you charge these things, and how far can you go on a full charge, and what does it cost to purchase, own, and maintain these vehicles. So what we're going to do in this program is we're going to compare 12 popular electrical vehicles to each other and to 3 popular gasoline vehicles. We'll look at the advantages, disadvantages, prices, range, charging, safety, and practicality of driving an electric vehicle. I always start my program with this screen because this I find is fascinating. I've been doing this program many times here, and I have yet to have anyone really accurately answer this question. 1 gallon of gasoline weighs 6 pounds. When you burn a gallon of gasoline in the car, how many pounds of carbon dioxide do you produce from that gallon of gasoline? Think about it for just a second. What would you say? Well, the answer is 20 pounds of carbon dioxide. And this is what everyone says, Steve, how can you get 20 pounds of carbon dioxide from 6 pounds of gasoline? It can't be done. Well, if you are a chemist, you know how it can be done. Gasoline is a hydrocarbon, carbon and hydrogen. Hydrogen is the lightest element in the universe. When you burn that gasoline, the carbon exchanges that hydrogen for 2 oxygens, and each oxygen is 16 times heavier than a hydrogen. So, hydrocarbon is carbon and that super light hydrogen. Burn it, and it turns into carbon dioxide, which is the same carbon, except it has 2 heavy oxygens with it. And that's the reason that the carbon dioxide actually weighs more than the hydrocarbon that produced it. So the consequence of this is that 10 gallons of gasoline means you've output 200 pounds of carbon dioxide, and every 100 gallons of gasoline that you purchased has output 1 ton of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, which is pretty critical because atmospheric carbon dioxide is increasing. You probably heard this. The pre-industrial level is 278 parts per million, and this smooth red line goes all the way back 800,000 years, and never in those 800,000 years, and these are ice core records from Antarctica, never in those 800,000 years has the carbon dioxide level ever exceeded 300 parts per million. But now we are up. In 2020, we are up to 417 parts per million. That's a 50% increase. In 2022, we went up to 420 parts per million. The truth is that the total fossil carbon dioxide added to the global atmosphere is not decreasing, it's increasing. One of the top contributors to carbon dioxide emissions is transportation. Back in 2011, let's take a look back here. Back in 2011, there were only 55,000 electric cars on the road, mostly Nissan Leafs. They were one of the very first companies to start producing electric vehicles. Then the Chevy Bolt came along, which was a plug-in hybrid. That was popular for a little while, but never in great numbers, as you can see here. Then the Nissan Leaf started to pick back up again until Tesla came online in 2015, 2016, and that is when the number of electric vehicles really started to pick up. Even then, in 2016, China had 474,000 electric vehicles. The United States was nowhere near as many. And even now, in 2021, China has 3.7 million electric vehicles. United States only has 631,000. Germany has more than we do, or did in 2021 anyway, of close to 700,000 vehicles. The number of electric vehicles has exploded in the past 10 years. to more than 100 times what it was 10 years ago. China has created a huge electric vehicle market since 2020. Now the entire world is moving quickly in the EV direction. The US annual growth rate, the compound annual growth rate, is 22.79%, which is very fast. Many new models are now available. Now, what's interesting is China has hundreds of electric car companies, and Tesla accounts for 40% of all electric vehicles sold in the United States between 2010 and 2019. As far as the plug-in hybrids are concerned, 71% were battery electric vehicles. Only 30% were plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and I just read a report recently that said that a lot of people are not plugging in their plug-in hybrids. They're just running them on gas, so that's an interesting twist to having a plug-in hybrid as opposed to a pure electric vehicle. So which EV is the most appealing to you? Let's choose a couple possibilities. Let's take a look at the types of cars we're going to be comparing here. I said we're going to compare 12 electrics to 3 gas cars, and here's our list of vehicles. Now these are all model 2022 vehicles because this is where I can get reliable information about the history and prices and performance and features and all that sort of thing. If I go to 2023, all these 2023 models are changing, improving, costs are changing, value, all sorts of things are changing. So I'm sticking with 2022 right now. And I have the Nissan Leaf, the Chevy Bolt, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, the Mustang Mach-E, Volkswagen ID4, Kia EV6, 2 Teslas, the Model 3, the Model Y, and the Model Y is in green because that's the car I'm driving. That's the only reason it's in green. And the Lucid Pure. All the black vehicles, with the exception of the green one, there are basically passenger cars. The blue vehicles are electric truck types, the Rivian R1T, the F-150 Lightning Extended Range, and the GMC Hummer EV. Yes, they do make an electric Hummer. We're going to compare all these cars to the Honda Accord Hybrid, the Subaru Outback, and the conventional F-150 gasoline. Let's take a look at what kind of features we're looking at. All of these cars that are passenger cars are basically SUV types or sedans. The Nissan Leaf is considered a basic hatchback. The Teslas are pretty techy sedans or SUVs for the Model Y. The Model Y is more of an SUV. The Model 3 is a sedan type. The Lucid Pure I have as a luxury sport vehicle because it's the most expensive of all the passenger cars. The Rivian R1T is a truck. The Lightning is a truck, and a Hummer I'm calling a truck. I'm not sure what you want to call it, but I'm calling it a truck. All of them are all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, except for the Nissan Leaf, which is front-wheel drive only. The Chevy Bolt is also front-wheel drive. Now, this is not the Volt. This is the Bolt. It's front-wheel drive. It doesn't come in a all-wheel drive option. And the Honda Accord is also front-wheel drive. The Subaru Outback, the gasoline version, is all-wheel drive, and the gasoline truck is also all-wheel drive. Also, you'll see LR here, meaning that if there was a long-range option, I chose that long-range option. The Lightning calls it extended range, and so does the F-150 gasoline with the large gas tank is called extended range. So that's the feature there. So now that you've got a rough idea of what the names of the vehicles are, let's take a look at what they look like on the inside. How different do they look from the inside? Now, this is the Hyundai Ioniq 5, and what I want you to notice here is that it's a pretty clean dashboard. There's nothing really magic about it. It looks pretty much like a conventional car. There's an instrument cluster here, a nice computer screen here, a couple of buttons here, some buttons on the steering wheel, some buttons down on the, below the instrument clusters down here, some more buttons down here, probably for climate control, and nothing really unusual as far as the interior dashboard is concerned. This is the Chevy Bolt, one of the least expensive vehicles. We'll go over price in just a second. Computer screen, instrument cluster, things that are not that unusual for a modern vehicle of any kind today. There's a bunch of buttons here on the steering wheel, bunch of buttons here for probably climate control again. There's some power adjustment buttons here, and pretty normal. Here's the F-150 Lightning truck. This is the Ford electric truck. Notice lots of buttons, lots more buttons, lots more buttons, buttons all over the place. Just all kinds of buttons. Buttons on the computer screen, plus an instrument cluster, plus a few more buttons here. If you like buttons, then you'll probably love the dashboard of this truck. Then we go to the Tesla Model Y, which is just the opposite. There's nothing except the computer screen in here. There's two little spinner knobs on the steering wheel. That is it. There is no instrument cluster up here. There are no buttons on the sides below where the instrument cluster normally is. There is just a computer screen. Fact is, there's a glove box here, but there is no key for the glove box. There is no switch for the glove box. The only way you can open up the glove box is to go to the computer screen and touch the open glove box function. And then the glove box pops open. That's the way this car is designed. My personal explanation is that this is not a car. This is a computer with wheels. And you're driving a computer with wheels, and it really feels that way. It even gets over-the-air software updates on a regular basis. And so this is constantly being kept up to date. Let's take a look at model prices. Are electric cars too expensive? That's a big question that comes up all the time. They're accused of being luxury vehicles. Let's take a look. Here it works out. The Nissan Leaf, and these are the 2022 prices now, were $36,400, and these are arranged according to price, going up to the Lucid Pure at about $95,000. Our Rivian R1T at $70,000. This is the truck. The Lightning at $81,000, and the Hummer at $105,000. And keeping in mind that especially on the trucks, there are different trim models, and these prices can vary very significantly. Also, the vehicles here are arranged, as I said, by price, but you'll notice that there is an asterisk by certain cars here. The 3, the Y, the Rivian, the ER, but not on the Hummer. The reason for that is because the models that have the asterisk are eligible for the 2023 $7,500 tax credit. Now that means whatever this price was, subtract $7,500 from that price, because you're going to get that back as a tax credit. There are some cars here that don't get the tax credit. The Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the Kia EV6 and the Lucid Pure. The Hyundai and the Kia are made in South Korea. They're not made in the United States. They don't get the tax credit. The Lucid Pure is a $95,000 vehicle. They figure you don't need a tax credit if you can afford a $95,000 vehicle. And the same thing for the GMC Hummer EV. That's $105,000. It's too expensive. Now, as a result of there being a price cutoff for electric vehicles, the Model Y initially did not qualify for the $7,500 tax credit because it was $66,000. The cutoff was $55,000. So, just about 2 weeks ago, and this is in February 1st that I'm making this recording now, about 2 weeks ago, they dropped the price by $13,000 and made this a $53,000 car. Now it qualifies for the $7,500 tax credit. So you get a $66,000 price car for $53,000, and then you subtract another $7,500 off of that, and all of a sudden Tesla Model Ys once again have been selling like crazy. But the comment that I frequently get is, electric cars are luxury cars. Let's see how true that is. Are electric vehicles a luxury? Now, all new vehicles average out to be about $48,043. All right. Luxury cars average about $75,000. Electric vehicles average about $67,000, and then it just goes right down the range here until you get to a compact car at about $26,000. So, price or cost efficiency is the determining factor for some people, but there are tax credits now, and that determines what price range you're going to wind up shopping in. And you saw there was a range of prices on those vehicles that we just took a look at. Also, some people don't really care so much about the actual purchase price. They're worried about the leasing price, and that is highly variable. So those are factors also that are influencing the actual price of an electric car. Other people choose other reasons. They'll choose the look, or they'll choose comfort. How comfortable are the seats? How good is the stereo? Or they have a purpose for that vehicle. It has to perform some sort of a function that has a special value. When it comes to luxury cars, here's the luxury registrations between January to August in 2021. And if you look at that list, and we're talking all about all gasoline cars, because we're not talking just electric here, we're talking about luxury vehicles, period. Gasoline cars are in the top 10 with the exception of Tesla. Tesla is also in the top 10 list. In 2021, it worked out to be something like number 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 was BMW, 2 was Lexus, 3 was Mercedes-Benz, and number 4 was Tesla. But in 2022, that changed. Tesla is now the number 1 selling luxury registration, or at least it was back in January of August of 2022. Why? Why Tesla? Well, let's take a look at U.S. electric vehicle sales in the first half of 2022. It'll be probably hard for you to read some of the names here, so I'll read these off for you. The top green line, the number 1 selling electric vehicles in the United States in the first half of 2022 was a Tesla Model Y with 102,000 cars sold. Then came the Tesla Model 3 with another 100,000 vehicles. Then came the Tesla Model X with 18,000 vehicles. Then came finally a Ford, the Ford Mustang Mach-E with only 17,600 vehicles. Now keep in mind we have 100,000 here, 100,000 here, 18,000 here, and the Ford Mustang Mach-E was at 17. And then after that comes the next Tesla, Tesla Model S. Now that's all the Teslas there are, and that had 14,000. So if you just took and added all the Teslas together, add this and this and this and this one together, this green line would extend way off the screen, and you could barely even see the other models that are being sold in the United States right now. But let's go down the list anyway. And here's the Hyundai Ioniq 5 at 13,700, the Kia EV6 at 12,000, the Nissan Leaf at 7,000. So we're getting into much smaller numbers here now. The Chevy Bolt at 7,000, the Rivian R1T at 5,700, the Volkswagen ID4, these are the ones that are on the list. I'm just mentioning those that are on our list, at 4,000. The F-150 Lightning, despite all the hype, only sold 2,300 of those in that first half of 2022. The Lucid Air, which was a very expensive passenger car, they only sold about 1,100 of those. And the Hummer EV was not even 400. So by comparison, nothing is even coming close to Tesla. Tesla is setting the standard for electric vehicles, and everyone else is just playing catch-up. They don't even advertise. This is all done by people getting in a car and driving them and liking the idea of electric vehicles. There are laws in the state of Michigan, which is the state that I live in. They're called franchise laws. And the idea behind the franchise laws was that the car dealers did not want the car manufacturers selling directly to the public. So they created laws, and these laws were refreshed back in the 20-teens somewhere, about 2016, 2017, so that manufacturers cannot sell their own car in the state of Michigan. They must go through a dealer. So basically, we're protecting the car dealers with this law. Now, what that means is I had to buy my Tesla out of state, and I had to go to Illinois to go pick it up. I could have gone to Wisconsin. I could have gone to Minnesota. That's fine. Any of those other states, then driven the car home and transfer the title in the state of Michigan. Then I can have my car in the state of Michigan. I have a Tesla in the state of Michigan. This is the same thing for the Rivian. They can't sell in the state of Michigan. Or for the Lucid. They can't sell in the state of Michigan either because they all want to sell directly to the public, but the dealers will not allow that to happen. In fact, Tesla can't even have a service center in the state of Michigan, with the exception of one very limited service center in Grand Rapids right now. They can only do a certain amount of work. Otherwise, you have to have the car taken to a different location. That's not true for the other car manufacturers. They will repair them in the state of Michigan because they don't violate that franchise law. But the three that I just mentioned, Tesla, Lucid, and Rivian, are not available in the state of Michigan. And there are a handful of other states in the United States that also have similar franchise laws. All right, this is this is what drives everyone crazy. This is the biggest hang up that I hear all the time. How far can you go on an electric car before you run out of battery? It's the second biggest barrier, and it's the one thing that freaks the most people out. I'm going to try and get you to not freak out, and I'll explain why here in just a second. Let's take a look at this. We had these vehicles arranged by price, and you can see that some of them were as low as $36, and with rebates, now we're talking, in many cases, Chevy Bolt lowered their price recently too. You can get these things for close to $20,000 by the time you're taking all your credits and all these things into consideration. Then you've got a lot of vehicles in the $45,000, $47,000 range, which is about average. And the Teslas are a little bit more expensive, I should say. And the trucks are also, as always, more expensive. But let's take a look at the range. The range is the EPA range. Now, these are the ranges specified by the Environmental Protection Agency, and they're the same group that specifies the ranges for gasoline-powered cars, and they use the same criteria. So how far can a car go on a full battery charge is what you're seeing here, and how far can a car go on a full tank of gasoline as specified for these particular models, and that's what I've listed here. So what you can see is that most electric cars are in the 250 to 300 mile range. Until you get to the Teslas, they break the 300 mile ranges for a full charge. And the Lucid Pure, one of its popular features is that it has like the longest range of any of the passenger cars, but you're paying a premium of $95,000 for this. The issue here is that your least expensive vehicles have the shortest ranges, your more expensive vehicles have longer ranges, and your trucks, despite having a higher price tag, have no more range than the Teslas do, only slightly more than a passenger car. So despite having a much more expensive vehicle, the range on the electric trucks is not that much better, and interestingly yet, they're not very different from each other. I mean, look, we're talking 15 miles different between all three of these vehicles on a full charge. And compare that to the gasoline-powered cars. The gasoline-powered cars seem to have a lot more range, and this is what is freaking people out. I know a lot of people that want an electric car to go 600 miles on one charge. I'm going to tell you why that's a ridiculous idea, and you should rethink that, and I'll explain in just a minute here. So the reason cars can go different distances is because of the size of the tank. So the gasoline cars have very large tanks and can store a lot of energy in their tanks. I'm looking at kilowatt hours here because kilowatt hours determines the tank size. That is the size of the tank for an electric car. It's measured not in gallons, but in kilowatt hours. So you can see that the least expensive vehicles have the smallest battery. And as the battery size goes up, the range goes up. So it's almost a direct relationship between the battery size and the range. So really, when you say you want more range, you're saying you want a bigger battery. Because if you look at the Lucid Pure, it's got the 88 kilowatt hour battery to go 471 miles. Interestingly, the trucks have almost twice the battery of some of these other cars. Here's a 65 kilowatt hour Chevy Bolt, and here's a 135 kilowatt hour Rivian R1T, twice the battery, but not much different range because these vehicles, these trucks are not so aerodynamic. They have much more weight, and because they have a much larger kilowatt hour tank, the batteries weigh more too. So the vehicles are extra heavy, which makes it harder to move them. So you have to have more power. And when you use more power to move a certain distance, your range suffers. That's the idea behind these trucks having such a large battery pack, is they're moving a lot of weight very inefficiently, and we'll talk about that in a second. But let's get this idea of a kilowatt hour all straightened out first. A microwave uses about 1,000 watts of power. 1,000 watts equals 1 kilowatt of power. If you run the microwave for an hour, you use 1,000 watts for an hour, which is 1 kilowatt hour of energy. Now that's the difference between energy and power. Power is the strength, which is 1,000 watts. Energy is how long you can use it. So if you use 1,000 watts for an hour, you use up 1 kilowatt hour of energy. 1 kilowatt hour is about 15 cents. This is what you're charged for on your electric bill, is kilowatt hours. Kilowatt hours is what you're paying for. In our area, it's about 15 cents for a kilowatt hour of energy. Kilowatt hour is the gasoline of electric vehicles. That gasoline goes into batteries. And a common question is, where are the batteries? And the answer is, almost always, for almost all electric vehicles, they are underneath the floor that you're sitting on while you're driving in the car. These are all the batteries right here. Your seats are on top, and that's just the way it works out. They're protected by steel plates so that you don't have any issues with damaging the batteries. And this provides a very low center of gravity, makes electric vehicles very hard to flip over. That's one of the reasons they get a very high safety rating. The motors are near or on the axles. That's what these red devices are. These are the motors. And in fact, this is an all-wheel drive. It's got a motor in the front and a motor in the back, so it's an all-wheel drive vehicle. EVs have far fewer parts to fail, and there's almost no maintenance. When I looked at the maintenance for my Tesla, here's what it told me for maintenance. It said, rotate the tires and fill the windshield washer. That's it. There's no 20,000 mile checks, 30,000 mile checks, no oil changes, no exhaust system, nothing. Just rotate the tires and fill the windshield washer. Interesting. The space in front of the front wheels is often open and called a frunk. You can open up the hood, and instead of there being an engine in there, there's another storage space in there. It's called a frunk. And the area in the back, there'll be another trunk, conventional trunk back here, but those are really crunch zones, which adds to the safety of the vehicle. The Tesla Model Y wins the 2023 Safety Award with a near perfect safety rating. Now, what's interesting is that people are very, very concerned about these cars, and they are getting the highest safety ratings of any vehicles. The battery. Let's take a closer look. The Tesla 75 kilowatt hour battery. Now this is 75 kilowatt hours. This battery can run a microwave oven for 75 hours. All right? That's how big the battery capacity is. But it contains 4,500 rather small cells. When you look down here, this is what the steel covers off, so you can see underneath. All those little dots are separate little cells, and a battery is defined as a collection of cells. So the battery is 4,500 cells. They work together, and they give you massive amounts of power, but each one is only slightly bigger than a AA battery. And this is hard to believe, but that's really an actual Tesla cell. And there's 4,500 of them in the car. They're typically made today of lithium ion, but you can get cobalt-free lithium iron phosphate batteries. And future cells are probably going to be different because they're even working on things like solid-state batteries that may eliminate other production problems. How long do the batteries last? People ask this all the time. So let's take a look at this chart. 0 to 100. You just bought the car. You have 100% battery capacity. You drive it for 200,000 miles, and the battery capacity should be maybe 10% or 12% less than it was when you bought it. Now, this is data from the Tesla cars because Tesla has billions of miles of records. Now, I'm not trying to sell you on Teslas. What's happening here is that Tesla has all the data and all the experience and all the technology. So I mentioned Tesla because I have information from Tesla, and this is fairly representative to the rest of the electric car industry. The blue line is standard deviation. There can be some variations in here, but the red line is the basic retention rate of how much capacity. Electric vehicle batteries are required by law to have an 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty that says that you will not have less than 70% of the original battery's range. If you look at this chart, you're only about maybe 90% of range after 200,000 miles. That's quite a distance away from that. The law requires a 100,000-mile warranty, 8 years. I actually have on my car, because some makers offer longer warranties, a 120,000-mile warranty on the batteries. They normally last the life of the car, and the design life is 300,000 miles or 10 to 20 years. So all this talk you hear about the batteries being dead in 5 years and you have to throw the car away is pretty ridiculous. I think people are equating electric car batteries with the 12-volt battery that's in their gasoline car, where you get 5 years out of it and you got to change the battery out. That's not true on electric cars. Everybody tells me about battery fires. So let's take a look at this issue. You probably heard this. When electric cars get in accidents, they explode. They catch fire very, very badly because of the lithium batteries. And PolitiFact has done the research and has said, no, that's not true. See, the suggestion is that many electric vehicles burn up like this. Oh, wait. That's not an electric vehicle fire. That is the gas-powered Mini Cooper fire that killed Anne Heche, the actress, and also started a house on fire. There is a recall going on right now. Ford recalls over 500,000 SUVs after 20 fires break out. And what's interesting in this caption, it says some of the same Ford Escape and Ford Bronco Sport models involved in this recall were also involved in an earlier recall for an unrelated issue that could also cause fires. So I guess gasoline cars have fires too. Well then, I wonder. Now, this is the worst EV fire that I can find. Which burn more then, gas or electric? We should settle this question. Auto Insurance EZ studied the frequency of fires from all causes, including collisions in automobiles in 2021. And here's what they found. Hybrid vehicles, which have an internal combustion engine and an electric motor, had the most fires. 3,475 per 100,000 vehicles. That's 3.5%. Vehicles with just a gas engine came in second. 1,500 per 100,000 cars, 1.5%. Electric vehicles, fully electric, plug-in electrics, had the fewest fires. 25 per 100,000 vehicles, or 25 thousandths of 1%. Extremely low. So let's look at this from a different perspective. Let's look from the millions of miles traveled per fire. Now, this down here is the average in the United States according to the National Fire Protection Agency and the U.S. Department of Transportation. It says that after 19 million miles of driving, a car is going to start on fire. That's the average in the United States. But take a look at, and we'll go to the far right. This is the bottom line here. This is the most recent, 2012 to 2021. If it's still 19 million miles for any car to basically start on fire, but Tesla has been tracking this, and in their cars, you have to go 210 million miles. Not 19, you have to go 210 million miles before you have an electric car fire. That means that you are 10 times more likely to get in a car fire if you have a gasoline or an average vehicle. the electric vehicles are actually safer. And what's very fascinating is that you have the people who are doing the crash tests on cars to come up with these safety ratings. And from what I've read, they have yet to have an electric vehicle start on fire, even though they are regularly crashing these cars. Here's another comment that I get a lot. Electric vehicle car batteries destroy the environment and violate human rights. And this is a lithium mine. One of the biggest source of lithium right now is in Australia. Then comes Chile, and then finally China. And these big ponds are how they extract lithium from the ore that they mine it with. This is cobalt in Central Africa, and there's some human rights issues associated with that. So there's environmental issues here for the lithium, and there's human rights issues and environmental issues for cobalt. Oil production destroys the environment and violates human. This is a lot like the electric car starting on fire thing. We hear about the electric car fires because it's new news. We don't even talk about the gasoline car fires anymore because they're so common. So electric car fires hit the news. Electric car batteries destroying the environment hit the news, but oil production hits the news. It's just that we don't talk so much about this anymore, like the spills that we've had here in the United States or the bigger spills that have even happened in other parts of the world. Human rights can be addressed through legislation. This is something that can be fixed through the laws. Battery chemistry for cars, but also for your cell phones, because you're using basically a variation of the same battery in your cell phone. They're going to evolve. Climate change is a bigger and more urgent environmental and human rights problem than battery production. We can't fix fossil fuel. Waiting to electrify makes these issues worse. Miles per gallon versus miles per gallon equivalent. How can EVs possibly get over 100 miles per gallon? Here we're seeing 119 miles per gallon. How is that possible? Let's take a look at these vehicles for a second here. All right, so we got our tank size, and we have our range here. So let's take a look at the efficiency. Efficiency, which is miles per gallon equivalent, and the electric cars are all coming in at about 100 miles to a gallon. The Teslas are coming in at 120 to 130 miles to a gallon. The Lucids at 116. And look at the efficiencies on the trucks and on the Hummer. The trucks go down to almost maybe 70% or even 60% of what the passenger cars are doing. The trucks, even though they're electric, they're not so aerodynamic, and they weigh so much more because their batteries are so doggone big. They're not anywhere near as efficient as passenger vehicles. Then compare that to the energy efficiency of the gasoline cars. So the electric Hummer has about the same efficiency as the Honda Accord. The Subaru Outback is nowhere near as good as the electric cars, and the F-150 gasoline is the worst out of all the vehicles that we have listed on the screen so far. But let's take a look at this number. How can this possibly be where we have 119 miles to a gallon? Well, first let's look at gasoline vehicles. All right, gasoline vehicles, and this one's getting 26 miles per gallon, and that 26 miles per gallon is a combination of city and highway driving according to the EPA's standard testing procedures, and it takes 3.8 gallons of gasoline to go 100 miles in this particular vehicle that gets 26 miles per gallon. If you drive this car 15,000 miles and the price of gas is $3.70 a gallon, then annually for 15,000 miles, this car is going to cost you $2,150. And because you are getting a 26 mile per gallon gasoline powered car, which is better in efficiency than the standard average vehicle, which gets only 22 miles per gallon, then you save $1,850 over 5 years because you have a more efficient than average vehicle, and that's a good thing. Now let's take a look at electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are getting 119 miles per gallon equivalent, so how can this be? How do you compare this E? Notice MPGe. E stands for equivalent. How do you get the equivalent of electricity compared to gasoline? Let's take a look at this. To compare gasoline to electricity, you need a common unit. So how much energy, heat, is contained in a gallon of regular gasoline? This is how much energy is in a gallon of gasoline. So we want to know that so we can compare. Well, it looks like if you burn a gallon of gasoline, you'll get 114,500 BTUs, British thermal units. You'll get 114,500 BTUs of heat out of 1 gallon of gasoline. So then the question is, how many kilowatt hours, remember that's the amount of energy required to do electrical work, how many kilowatt hours of electrical energy are needed to produce 114,500 BTUs of heat? Then we would be able to compare. And it turns out that 33.7 kilowatt hours will generate the same amount of heat of 114,500 BTUs. So 1 gallon of regular gasoline equals 33.7 kilowatt hours of electricity. Now, if a car can travel 100 miles on 33.7 kilowatt hours, it gets 100 miles per gallon because those are the equivalents. So when you look at this, you're seeing 119 miles per gallon here because this particular electric vehicle only takes 30 kilowatt hours to go 100 miles. If it had 33.7 kilowatt hours, it would go 119 miles on that 33.7 kilowatt hours that came out of the battery. The driving range is 245 miles for a full charge. And still, don't freak out. We're going to take and explain why this is not a problem at all. We'll get to that. Give me just a few minutes here. The charge time. Don't freak out on this one either. It says 8 hours, but notice it says 240 volts. That's what it means to go to a completely full charge from a completely empty battery in your garage. Now, we'll talk about this in just a second when we talk about chargers, and you'll find out that this is not a big factor either. Annual fuel cost for an electric vehicle. Based on these conditions of 119 miles per gallon equivalent, if you go 15,000 miles at a cost of 12 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, we were paying 15 cents a kilowatt hour here in Michigan, where I live, but this is based on 12 cents a kilowatt hour. So we could say 600, but we'll just use these numbers because they're nice and neatly put on the screen already. But this is what's going to cost you per year to run this car the same distance as running this gasoline car on this side. People say, well, your electric bill is going to go through the roof. Well, let's take a look at this for a second. $540 per year divided by 12 months means that on average, my electric bill is going to go up $45 a month for electric fuel for my car. And then someone's going to say, $45 a month? Gee, I can't afford that. Well, you're forgetting that when you buy gasoline for your gasoline car and it costs you $2,150 for the gasoline, you're already spending $179 per month for gasoline. So this actually saves you like $130 per month just because you're driving an electric car versus a gasoline car. Now, if you have an internal combustion F-150 that gets 21 miles to a gallon, you're spending $220 a month to go the same 15,000 miles at $3.70 a gallon. And when the price of gas goes up, and it's expected to hit about $4 in April here, this price is going to go up. Notice that because you got a more efficient vehicle, you saved $1,850 over 5 years because you got a vehicle that's more efficient than the 22 mile per gallon standard vehicle. This one only costs $500. Over 5 years, you save close to $10,000. So subtract that from the price of that vehicle that you're thinking about right now. Here's something interesting. The 119 miles per gallon also came from city and highway driving. And if you compare that to the gasoline vehicle, you should notice something very interesting. In a gasoline car, your city mileage is 22 miles a gallon in this example. The highway is 32, and that's pretty normal. The highway mileage is usually better than the city mileage. But look at the electric car. At the electric car, the city miles per gallon is better than the highway. Just the opposite. Now, let's take a look at this feature. All ICE cars, ICE stands for internal combustion engine. We call them ICE age cars, those of us who drive electric. ICE age cars show the same basic pattern of efficiency. They generally get the highest miles per gallon between 40 and 60 miles per hour. And when you do that, you get your maximum efficiency. If you go past 65 miles an hour, which is this black line, then the efficiency starts to drop off. Even on the Priuses and on the Honda Civic and Subaru Up, they all just drop off as you go past 65 miles an hour. So when you're doing 80, 85, you're getting much worse gas efficiency. You just don't notice it because your tank is so big. When you go into town and you're driving in a city, and all the stop and go traffic and the low RPMs and the low speeds that you're traveling in at 20 and 30 miles an hour, your efficiency drops there too. So your EPA standard is going to just totally deteriorate when you're driving in town or when you're driving over 65 miles an hour. That's just pretty conventional. The city driving is worse than EPA estimates, and so your estimates wind up being over here in this 20 to 35 mile per gallon range, when really the cars at their optimum are in the 30 to 50 mile per gallon range. That's a big difference there. Now let's take a look at electric cars. Electric cars are very different. Electric cars get their maximum efficiency at anywhere from 15 to 35 miles per hour. City driving. You can get a very high number of miles per gallon when you're commuting with your car in the city. But when you go faster than 65 miles per hour, your efficiency drops down quite a bit. There's a lot of reasons for that. You'll do better than the EPA estimates in city driving, and you're going to wind up in this range when you are getting your range estimates for the car. But the city driving, as I say, is going to be much better. Your highway driving is going to be worse than what the EPA's estimates are. That's because electric vehicles have no transmission. Wind resistance is a factor for electric vehicles. That's why the passenger cars are so streamlined. And they decrease range, but not power. So when you have these range variables, you're seeing the differences in range here, but the power of the car remains the same. And the power of electric vehicles is generally very powerful. They're very fast. They're breaking every record you can think of against gasoline cars. So the Bolt's actual EPA range in this particular situation is 247 miles, but you can see that in town, you're getting close to 400 miles if you stayed in that range. I live in the Upper Peninsula. It gets cold up here. In fact, it's 0 degrees today while I'm recording this. The question is, what happens to the batteries in cold temperatures? What happens when it's 22 degrees below zero? Now, Marquette's coldest month is January, and the average temperature overnight is about 3 degrees Fahrenheit above zero, but people want to go to the extreme, so they ask me about 22 below. And the answer is the car starts. Even if it's colder, the EVs will start, since we don't have to worry about combustion and all these other variables that are temperature sensitive. The car just goes. It can be very cold, you get in the car, and it goes. Preconditioning, if it's available, and not all electric cars have preconditioning, or just driving, warms up the batteries to optimum temperature and preheats the cabin. So you kind of get a remote start feature with an electric car, almost built in automatically, because you can just tell the car that you're going to be leaving soon. It'll start to heat up the cab on the inside. By the time you get there, your car is all preheated and ready to go. Preconditioning works on the batteries, trying to bring the batteries up to optimum temperature. And we'll talk about that next. Range versus temperature. The ideal battery temperature is 72 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take a couple of degrees. The EPA range estimates the battery range based on anywhere from 50 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and somewhere in there is where the EPA range is working out to give you an EPA estimate. At 72 degrees, you might get more than the EPA range just simply because of the temperature. If you go higher in temperature than 90 degrees, then you start to lose some of your range, not power, range. Cold or hot batteries reduce the EPA estimates. Preconditioning, which is actually warming the batteries, deliberately warming the batteries up, helps you stay in that 72-degree range, but that takes energy to do that. If you look at the cold weather performance here, you'll see that you're losing quite a bit of percentage. Snow tires have a higher rolling resistance. The air, believe it or not, is thicker in winter than it is in the summer, and so it's almost like pushing the car through water. It's almost the way it is. Obviously, it isn't. It's not quite as bad as that, but winter air is thicker than summer air, and so it takes more energy to go through. And if you've ever pushed a shopping cart from the grocery store to your car through the parking lot when there's snow and slush on the road, you know it takes way more energy to move that shopping cart through that parking lot than it did when it was all dry and smooth. So as the temperature goes down, the range of the battery goes down. This is where some of the people get very nervous, but they shouldn't, because think about this. If you're driving from home in one day, your car starts out with 200 or 250 miles worth of range, maybe even 150, as low as 150. But let's say 250 miles worth of range is available to your car, and the temperature gets down, in the 20s. So here we are, 15 degrees, 32 degrees. So let's say it's in the 20s, right around here. You have to heat the interior of your car with battery power, and that could take either direct heating with an electric heater or with a heat pump. Temperature decreases the range, but it does not decrease power. Now, if you're looking at temperatures in the 20s and your vehicle normally has 250 miles of range for the day, because you're going to take it home and you can recharge it again in the evening when you get home, 250 miles of range when you start out in the morning. In the 20s, you'll have maybe 180 miles of range. Now, if you're not driving 180 miles that day, and very few people do that every day, very few people do that very often, 180 miles in one day. So you're not going to run out of battery power at 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Even if you were down to around zero and you were losing 50% of capacity, if you started at 250 miles, you'd be down to 125. How many times do you drive 125 miles in a day? And even if you did, all you would have to do is stop at a commercial charger and add some more capacity to your battery and then drive home and put it on the charger. All right, let's continue on, because cold temperatures do reduce what is called regenerative braking. It's called single pedal driving. Electric cars, not all of them have this either, but many of them do, and most of them are getting to include this. Regenerative braking is something that people talk about when they first drive the car. The first thing they do is they say, I have to get used to this, because when you step on the accelerator, the car responds instantly and takes off. When you take your foot off the accelerator, and by the way, don't call it the gas because it's not gas, it slows down by itself. And it slows down by itself because it is taking the energy from the car and putting it back into the battery. So regenerative braking is recharging the battery with the car's energy, and that slows the car down. You can slow the car down all the way to a stop by letting it recharge the power back into the batteries. Well, in cold temperatures, that regenerative braking is not quite so strong, and you may have to start using the brake. In warmer climates with regenerative braking, you almost never use the brake. You learn how to throttle braking action of regenerative braking by taking your foot off the accelerator, and that is how you slow the car down. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. Preconditioning, I'm going to mention it again, it optimizes battery temperatures for regeneration and for winter charging. And winter charging is a factor too, because in cold weather, the batteries want to charge more slowly. So if you can warm those batteries up, you can recharge faster. And we'll talk about that in just a second here. All right, let's take a look back at our list. And we got this mile per gallon thing down. So the watt hours of energy per mile. So to go 1 mile, you have to have like 3 100-watt light bulbs running for an hour. That's how much energy it takes to go 1 mile on a Nissan Leaf. And most of these are between 3 and 400 watt hours, not kilowatt hours, watt hours, which means that you get about 3 miles. Let's say a Volkswagen ID4, you'll get about 3 miles of range on 1 kilowatt hour of electricity, which costs you 15 cents. The same thing goes true for almost all these other vehicles till you get to the Teslas. They're a little more efficient. The Rivians are less efficient. The Lightning is less efficient, and the Hummer is less efficient. And I did a conversion here to watt hours so you can compare gasoline cars for 1 mile of travel versus electric cars for 1 mile of travel. And it takes 1,618 or 1.6 kilowatt hours to go 1 mile in the F-150. So you can see how inefficient they are by comparison. To go 50 miles, let's say you do go 50 miles in a day. You're driving your electric car 50 miles a day. Now, in my programs, when I talk about this, what I find is that most people don't drive 50 miles a day. In fact, very few people, when I ask, raise your hand if you typically drive over 50 miles a day, almost no one does. What that means is that if you did drive 50 miles a day, you have to put 15.5 kilowatt hours of battery juice back in that car that night when you go home. And I'll tell you how you're going to do that when you go home. But this is how much you have to put back in the car to go back to charged up. And it's 17 for this car and 16 for this car. But you have to put quite a bit more into these Rivian R1Ts and the F-150, which means you spend more time charging these truck vehicles than you do charging a passenger vehicle. Passenger vehicles will charge much faster than the trucks will. And that's interesting. Let's take a look at charging here for a minute. How do you charge the car? Now, I have included this photograph specifically because 80% of all electric car drivers charge their car at home in their garage if they have one, or they maybe have an outlet mounted on the outside of the side of the house or out in front of the house in their driveway, assuming that they have a driveway. It's just an electrical box like this is all you need. This electrical box, and you plug a charger into that box, and that charges your car. 80% of all driving of electric cars is recharged by home charging. Now, you may need to add a charger, meaning you may need to add an outlet in your garage specifically for the car. But it can be an indoor or outdoor type charger situation. If you have a carport, you can put it there. There is a 30% tax credit for installing the charger. Whatever it costs, up to $1,000 can be credited 30% with a cap of $1,000 for installing a charger. So how do you charge a car? If this is the only type of outlet you have in your garage, these are designed to run your TV set or some low power device. They're not designed to be charging cars. These are referred to as trickle chargers, and you only get 2 to 5 miles of range per hour out of an outlet like this. If you pull more power out of this outlet than the amount used to get 2 to 5 miles per hour of range in your car, you'll blow the fuse. So this is only for trickle charging for low requirements for charging. 20 amps is the maximum here. This T-shaped bar, some of them just have 2 straight slots. Those are 15 amp circuits. The T-shaped one is a 20 amp circuit. So the most you can get is 1.6 kilowatt. You remember we needed about 15 kilowatt hours to recharge 50 miles. So take this and divide that into 15 and you'll find out that it's going to take about 10 hours to put 50 miles back in a car. This is less than desirable, but you can charge your car with this. It just takes a lot more time, and you're going to not always get a full charge when you want it. The next one is called level 2. This outlet like this is referred to as level 1 trickle charger. An outlet like this, a dryer outlet or an electrical oven outlet, this is the type of an outlet you want in your garage. It's going to get you 10 to 30 miles per hour of range, and that's called a level 2 charger. Or actually, it's not a charger, it's a power supply. You can get up to 60 amps. I'm only using a 20 amp circuit, at home. 240 volts, yes, but only 20 amps, and my car is charged every morning. I come home, I plug it in, I'm done. I wake up in the morning, it's charged, ready to go. And all I have is a 20 amp circuit at 240 volts. So you don't need a super high powered circuit to charge an electric car. And I've been doing this for 8 months, and as I told you, I put 16,000 miles on this car. And most of it has been charged with this 20 amp 240 volt circuit in my garage. Now, if you don't have that option of even any way of charging at home, you can use a level 3 charger. And the level 3 charger is what they call a direct current or fast charger. These two, level 1 and level 2, are putting AC from your house into the car, and the car converts it to DC and charges the batteries. But when you go to a level 3 charger, the level 3 charger is not putting AC in your car. It's putting direct current directly into the batteries. No conversion required. They are much more powerful. If you look at this, 2 to 5 miles per hour. If you go to level 2, it's 6 times that amount. If you go to a level 3, it's 10 times the amount of the level 2. This is 150 to 350 miles per hour of range. Now, you can actually get higher than that. I have plugged into level 3 chargers that give me 250 kilowatts of power, meaning that that charger has the capacity to run 250 microwave ovens all at the same time. That's how powerful it is. And so it charges my car very quickly. Fleet vehicles can use these high-speed level 3 chargers. Public, like me, I can use it. You can use it. Level 3 chargers. Multi-unit residential units may have something like this. This is an Electrify America charging system, a level 3 charger, high-speed chargers you can get depending on the date of manufacturing, depending on the location, and depending on variables, a couple other variables. These chargers can output up to 350 kilowatts. Here are Tesla chargers. Now, the interesting part is that Tesla chargers today, and they're talking about changing this, but as of right now, Tesla chargers can only charge Teslas. So if you want to charge a non-Tesla and you want a DC fast charge, you're going to be using something like this. But if you have a Tesla, you use these. And frankly, the reputation for Tesla has been that they have the best chargers out there and the most convenient chargers out there. They're very good. And I have used them many times, especially when we do these 1,000-mile road trips, which I've done, as I say, about 10 of them now. I use these Tesla chargers. And I've used these other ones too because I can plug a Tesla into these, but you cannot plug a non-Tesla into these. There are other charging companies, and you're looking at a range of them here. There are also situations where people have apartments or condos and they can use public chargers, and if they subscribe to that particular provider, you can get a reduced rate, or have the person that owns your complex, your condominium or apartment complex, install electric chargers for people to charge electric cars. There are tax credits available for adding chargers in homes and in businesses, and it's 30% of the cost. That's how much you get in a tax credit. So why not suggest it? There are resources available to inform condo and homeowners associations and apartments and to educate them about what it would take to put in an electric car charger. And then you'd have chargers there available to you all the time. Maybe no one's even asked for a charger yet. So there's lots of places to charge up your car as long as you don't get iced out. Now, this is a situation where this person driving this vehicle doesn't seem to like electric cars and has now blocked the entire string of chargers so that no one can charge their car. Here's another one. Look where he puts the charging cable. That's terrible. Some people just don't like electric cars, and that's just their problem. They're coming. They'll change. It'll just take time. All right, so how fast are the chargers? Well, each charger type has a different maximum charging rate. They're not all the same. If you're charging at home, you'll spend less time charging an electric vehicle than you do filling a gas tank on an ACH car. That's a common comment. I don't want to be standing here all day long charging my car. Gosh, I go to the gas station, it's a few minutes and I'm all done. Well, here with an electric vehicle, you charge at home, you don't go to the gas station at all. So that time is gone. The time standing there in the cold while you're putting gasoline in the tank of your gasoline car is gone because you don't do that. You come home, and if you have this charger in your garage, as I do, you come home, plug the car in, walk away, go have dinner, maybe watch some TV, fall asleep, get up in the morning, and you're ready to go. You spend almost no time at all involved in actually charging this car yourself. It does it all by itself. 50 miles is usually less than 4 hours of charge while you're sleeping. 80% full tank each morning is adjustable. Now, 80% is something you set the car for. I could have set it for 100%, but normally most people will only set for 80% because that's way more than enough miles that I'm going to need the next day anyway. If I know I'm going to need a lot more miles, like I'm taking a long trip, and I want to go as far as possible on the charge, then I might go to 100%. But normally, I only charge to 80%. And at 80%, you get about 200 miles of daily range, and you rarely have to recharge that same day. It is the least expensive recharge. Charging on a long trip, away from your home. I do these 1,000-mile trips. How fast is the charger? That's question number one. How fast can the car charge? That's question number two. So how fast is the charger? Well, hotels, work, malls, casinos often offer level 2 chargers, which are 6.2 to 19.2 kilowatt AC. Now remember, we needed 15 kilowatt hours to go 50 miles. So with these, if you got a 19.2 kilowatt charger, you could put 50 miles in that car in an hour. But these are low speed chargers. They're just convenient for you as a customer or an employee. They're providing a little service for you, a little perk. You'll get 15 to 20 miles per hour at 7 kilowatts. Notice 6.2 to 19. Most of the time, you're right around 7. This is a very common power level for these small chargers that are offered at hotels, work, malls, and casinos. Often, but not always, they're free. And the reason is because if they're paying a commercial rate for electricity, which is only 6 cents a kilowatt hour, a 7 kilowatt charger at 6 cents a kilowatt hour is only 50 cents for an hour of charge. So they lose 50 cents by letting you charge there for an hour at the mall. This is not a big expense, and so sometimes these things are free. You're just thinking, wow, I'm getting free power, so I'll stay there for a while and do my shopping and get some free electricity while I'm there. I'll be able to go home and not even have to consume any power overall to make the trip. Some RV parks with 50 amp service, like 11 kilowatts of power, they'll charge you to charge your car, and that you have to have an adapter usually for that because it's a standard 50 amp household type plug. There are adapters available so you can charge your car. Then there are public DC fast chargers, Tesla superchargers, and these are usually at Myers or Walmart or some other shopping malls, Woodman's, something like that. They vary from 50 to 300 kilowatts of power. Very powerful. Over 1,000 miles per hour of charge, meaning that there's 1,000 miles per hour of energy going into your car, these high-speed chargers. But it doesn't do this continuously until your batteries are full. It starts very fast, and you'll see in a second here it tapers down as time goes on. We'll take a look at that in just a second. There are apps that provide locations and details. In your phone, there are apps like PlugShare, a Better Route Planner. That's what this one is, ABRP, a Better Route Planner. There are provider apps, the people that provide the power like Electrify America or ChargePoint or something like that. You can even go to Google Maps and just ask for EV chargers, and it'll show you some of the chargers there, but PlugShare actually does a much better job. Let's take a look at that. All right, so this is Marquette, Michigan, where I live, and it's not a very large town. There's Northern Michigan University. You're seeing almost the entire city right here. These green chargers, and this looks like a gas pump almost, but they're actually chargers. These green chargers are the low power chargers. These are probably about 7 kilowatt, kind of like garage chargers. And here are Tesla chargers. These are Tesla superchargers right here, and there is a new one coming soon for non-Tesla vehicles at 150 kilowatts. So this is a 250 kilowatt charger, and there's 8 of them there. And they're putting in a couple 150 kilowatt chargers at the Myers grocery store here. And if we back off a little bit, you'll see that this is one of the few big towns in the Upper Peninsula, so there's a little bit of space in between them. But as you get farther away, there are quite a few chargers available, and many of these are not just single chargers. There's multiple chargers here. The orange colored ones are almost all high-speed DC chargers, and the green ones are usually lower speed chargers. But just to give you an idea of what PlugShare can show you, and you can do this anywhere in the country. I mean, if you back out even farther, you get all kinds of records here. So anyway, take a look in your own neighborhood, but it's called PlugShare, and that is a great app for telling people where the chargers are. Also, in your car, the car can tell you where the chargers are, because here is a map that came right off my computer screen in my car when I'm traveling from Marquette, Michigan to Rochester Hills, Michigan. The car shows me there are 8 chargers available here in Marquette. There are 8 chargers open and available here in Mackinac City, and there are 8 chargers available and open here waiting for me to charge here in Bay City, and I'm still up in Marquette. You can see that arrow right here. So this is telling me a bunch of information that I need to make my road trip. The car routes me right to a suitable charger and starts preconditioning as needed for fast charging. So as I get closer to the charger, I'll see a message on my computer screen that says it's preconditioning the battery and getting ready to charge the cars at the optimum levels, meaning as fast as possible. Notice that it's only 27 degrees out there right now at the time when I captured this screen. And that's the way the car routes you right to the chargers. It's not a problem. It shows you how much battery will be left, how many chargers are available, and how long you will be there charging. And range estimates are getting more accurate every month. Now, keep in mind, you're going to spend a little time charging here. Let's say at Mackinac City, I just drove 3 hours to get to this spot. And after 3 hours, I want to get up, walk around a little bit, tap a kidney, go, relax, maybe go get some snacks. And by the time I'm done doing that, and I'm kind of stretched out a little bit, I come back, my car is basically charged, and I move on down to Bay City and do it again. That's 3 more hours of driving. So just so you know, that's available. So how fast do the batteries charge? Do you fret about how long it takes your phone to charge? Probably not. You put it on the charger, and then you go do your thing that night. You wake up in the morning, your phone is charged. EV batteries don't fast charge at a constant rate, but you do the same thing. You put it on the charger, you wake up in the morning, it's done. So here's what happens in the background. Remember I said that when you put them on a fast charger, there's a 200 kilowatt charger. The blue line is a 2022 Rivian, and it charges initially for the first 20%, it charges at close to 200 kilowatts. Very powerful. But once you get to about 20% of charge, then it starts to slow down. And it slows down because the batteries, if they were constantly charged at this very high rate, the batteries would get warm or maybe even too hot. And so it throttles the charge rate down until you get down close to 90%, and then it's only about maybe a 30 or 40 kilowatt charge. Very slow charge at the high end. This is where, if you're traveling on the highway, you go to the fastest charger, you get the fastest charge possible, and then you drive to the next charger and you get a nice fast charge again. But it's not constant. So when people say, how long does it take to charge? I can't answer that. It varies in so many features. How fast is the charger? How fast is your car charge? You notice here, even that the F-150 does not charge at the beginning. It does not charge as fast as the Rivian does. And this is the old Rivian. Software update has now allowed the Rivian to charge more quickly. So these charge rates are constantly changing, but you can see that the general trend is for them to start fast and then taper down as you get close to a fully charged battery. Even a Tesla. Here's the old charge rate for the Tesla at 200 kilowatts. Now you can add it right into a 250 kilowatt charger, but you notice it leaves 250 kilowatts as the batteries get warmer, and it slows down to lower and lower charge rates until you're pretty close to 100%. Most people don't charge past 80%, which is going to be about 50 kilowatts, because that extra 20% takes a long time to fill up because the charge rate is so low at those high capacities of battery. The battery is almost full, and so it fills more slowly. In cars without preconditioning, cold weather will also slow down the charger. So you may have a car that would normally charge at 150 kilowatts, and if you don't have preconditioning in your car, it might fill at only maybe 75 or maybe even 55 kilowatts. So it's going to take much longer. That's why in cold weather climates, you want an electric car that has a preconditioning function. If it doesn't have it, you're going to take much more time charging at a fast charger. The fastest charger won't do you any good because you won't be able to charge that fast because your batteries are too cold. If you're in a cold climate, preconditioning is almost, in my mind, a prerequisite. You have to have it. All right, how fast can a car charge? Well, that's an interesting thing. Let's take a look at this. Here's the maximum charge rate. Now, this is interesting. The Nissan Leaf can charge up to 100 kilowatts if they have the right connector. The Chevy Bolt can't go higher than 55, and I don't care what kind of charger you put it on. 55 kilowatts is the fastest you can charge in a Chevy Bolt. Even though it's an inexpensive car, that's the consequence, is you're not going to charge quickly. Now, if you're not going very far, if you're just using this around town and you're going home and you're putting it in your garage, it's fine. All right? The Hyundai will charge on a 350 kilowatt charger. It'll take it and really charge pretty quickly. The Mustang Mach-E, half of that. Actually, a little less than half. The Volkswagen, less than half of the Hyundai. The Kia, right in between there, 233. The Tesla Model 3 and the Tesla Model 5, they'll charge at 250 kilowatt chargers. The Lucid, 300. The Rivian, only 200. The F-150, only 150 kilowatts. That's all you can pump into that thing at one time is 150 kilowatts maximum rate, and then it tapers down from there. The GMC Hummer EV, same thing. You can connect it to a 350 kilowatt charger if you can find one, and then when you find one, it's going to start charging quickly at 350, and then it's going to start tapering down. So let's take a look at the connectors on the car because those are not the same either. If you're just charging in your garage, you'll have a small connector that looks like this. This is called the J1772 and only goes up to 20 kilowatts maximum. If you want to go to DC fast charging, which means not in your garage, but out in the real world someplace at one of these commercial chargers, this connector, the top half of the DC fast charging connector, this is a CCS connector, the top half is the J1772. They are the same connector. All right, so when you're at home and you're just connecting to your garage, you plug into this one. But when you go to a DC fast charger, a commercial one, then you plug this whole unit in to your car because it's a CCS connector, and you can go up to 350 kilowatts of DC power into this. Tesla has their own connector. That's the reason that the other cars cannot use Tesla chargers, because they have their own connector. There is no adapter for a Tesla charger to connect to a car that only has a CCS connector. Now there is a fourth one called CHAdeMO, but this is only used by the Nissan Leaf, and they're becoming harder and harder to find. But the Nissan Leaf uses this one. It does not use this, and it does not use the Tesla. It has this. The Nissan Leaf has this one for your garage, and this one for high-speed charging for DC. Normally, you charge you 80%, 150 to 200 miles a day. Unless you need the extra range, then you go to 100%. So the cost of a supercharge. Let's take a look at this. Here we have our charge rates. We saw how fast we can charge various vehicles depending on the kind of connector they have. Here's your connectors. They all have this CCS connector except for the Teslas. The Teslas have their own, and the Nissan Leaf, as I mentioned, has this CHAdeMO. So it has the AC charger for your garage and the CHAdeMO for high-speed charging. Then, how long does it take to charge 50 miles? At home, in your garage, with a 40 amp circuit. Now, this is a 40 amp circuit, so you only use 32 amps because you only go 80% of the capacity of the circuit breaker. You want to charge 50 miles, you'll charge 50 miles in 2 hours with a Nissan Leaf. 2 hours for almost everybody. It's going to be 1.7 hours for the Tesla Model Y. That's because it's a more efficient vehicle. It needs less energy. The Lucid Pure is going to be about 2 hours also. The Rivians and the Hummers are going to be anywhere from 3 to 4 hours to go 50 miles of charge at home in your garage on a 32 amp circuit. So, your charge for 50 miles at 15 cents a kilowatt hour is about $2.50 for almost all the electric vehicles. But for the Rivians and the F-150 and the GMC, it's going to be about $3.60. The EV is going to be about $4.70. Now, comparing that to gas, your hybrid would cost you $4.20 to go 50 miles. The Subaru Outback would cost you $6.80, and you're putting almost $10 in the tank for an F-150 gasoline pickup truck. For 100 miles, 4.8 gallons of gasoline, but 34 kilowatt hours. For 250 miles, 77.5 kilowatt hours for the Leaf, 70 for the Teslas, and these guys are anywhere from 80 to 90, which is still not bad, because it works out to be about 5 cents per mile to drive these electric vehicles in the EPA's rated temperature range and speeds and all those sorts of things. But it comes out to be about 5 cents per mile for an electric car. The trucks are anywhere from 7 to 9 cents per mile. And if you look at the gasoline vehicles, they're anywhere from 9 to 14, and the truck is 19 cents a mile. So you're getting a comparison on a per mile cost here. Then, if you're at home and you want to go 250 miles, it's going to cost you about $10 or $12. If you're in the trucks, it's going to cost you almost $20. And if you are in a gasoline car, it'll cost you anywhere from $20 to $45 for the same 250 miles. So the supercharger costs, let's take a look at that. When you go to these superchargers, in this case, let's say I'm looking at Marquette, Michigan right now where I live, and this is at the Tesla supercharger. They were charging by the minute, and the minutes go according to how much power you're getting. When you're charging at 180 kilowatt, you're charging the high price of $1 per minute. When you're charging at the lower rate, and keep in mind that the charge rate tapers down as you go, then you pay less because you're getting less energy per minute. And then as you charge to the lower level yet, then you wind up paying even less because that's the slowest charge, so you're not putting that much power in, so you don't pay quite so much. Now, if you go to Mackinac Island, they don't charge by the minute, they charge by the kilowatt hour. And so here's 61 kilowatt hours at $27.45. That comes out to 45 cents a kilowatt hour, but Tesla has just lowered the prices to 37 cents a kilowatt hour, so it's cheaper to drive on the highway now than it was back then in September, which is when I recorded this information. Let's take a look at the super cost for 250 miles. If you're going at home, it costs you $10, but if you're going on a supercharger, it'll cost you almost 3 times as much. So you want to charge at home as much as possible. The home cost here for the Volkswagen is $12. The supercharger or high-speed fast charger is $33. So this is the difference between charging at home versus charging at these commercial chargers. If you have to go to the commercial chargers, you'll spend considerably more for energy. And the cost for 10,000 miles, $400, $500, where the gasoline cars are going to cost you anywhere from $850 to $2,000 to go 10,000 miles. That's in the case, of course, of 1 year. Then, carbon dioxide per 100 miles. Let's take a look at this. What if you charge with fossil fuel electricity? Are EVs really better for the environment? So if you take a look at the national averages, we're still charging about 38% on natural gas. That's how we're producing our electricity, is with natural gas. Coal is still hanging in there at 22%. Nuclear is about 20%. Then come the renewables. And then you get a little bit of geothermal and other fossil fuels in here. But if you look at this, for a gasoline vehicle, you're making 6 tons of carbon dioxide per year with a gasoline vehicle. So you know that that's going to be about 6 tons for 15,000 miles. If you have a hybrid, you're down to 3.2 tons, assuming that you drive that properly. A plug-in hybrid, notice, is only slightly better because people don't plug them in all the time. And all electric is still significantly about 1/3 the emissions of a gasoline powered vehicle. 1/3, even though we are using this non-renewable energy, because nationally it's not. In Michigan, it's very similar to this anyway, but still, the answer is the all-electric vehicles are about 1/3 of a gasoline-powered vehicle, even if you don't have renewable energy. Now, electricity is getting cleaner. You can't make gasoline cleaner. France now requires all parking lots, new and existing, with more than 80 spaces to be covered with solar panels. So adding EV chargers to every parking lot would be easy. Just think, chargers in every parking lot. Who should buy or lease a new or used electric vehicle? Now, in every 2-car family, one of the 2 cars should be electric. And this is a website that you can go to and look for even used electric vehicles if you wanted to. And if you're getting a new car today, it should be electric. Otherwise, if you're buying a new car, you're going to commit to 5 more years of burning gasoline. 5 more years. So if you're going to buy a new car, you should get an electric. So, what do you think? I've shown you a lot of details and options. Now, it might seem confusing because there's so many variables here, but once you get a single car, all those variables go away because you have a standard charger, you have a standard neighborhood charger that you might use, you have a certain collection of variables that don't change. So it should be fine. Okay, and that's it. We'll see you later.